welcome back to another episode of AGI, the Weekly Blitz. Julie has been replaced today by Chris Hutchinson, Director of Engagement for TechPoint. This is going to be an exciting interview. We're going to talk about exactly what is going on in the AI landscape in Indiana I met Chris. Let me just give a little bit of background, then I'll let you introduce yourself and talk about TechPoint, Chris. I love the networks that TechPoint provides, the Chief Data Officers Network. I try to be a fly on the wall and just learn because it's way out of my scope. The CTOs Network is almost like being surrounded by a bunch of mentors, but the Indiana AI Innovation Network is the first one I joined, and it's such an eclectic group. Everything from people who've hung a shingle and decided to become a no-code AI consultant like myself, to enterprise level presentations from companies like Cummins that are doing amazing build outs and everything in between, and just a phenomenal conversation. So why don't you introduce yourself? And for those who don't know what CICP and TechPoint are, just give a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jason, for having me. I really appreciate it. So again, Chris Hutchinson, Director of Engagement for TechPoint. I've been with TechPoint for about 2 years. A little bit about me first, and then I'll go into some deeper dives on TechPoint and CICP. From Ohio originally, actually from Bowling Green, Ohio. Grew up there and was a walk-on college hockey player there for a couple of years at Bowling Green State University. And then I went to Miami of Ohio and got my Master of Science in Sports Psychology. So my plan was always, at that point in my life, to become a sports psychologist. After a 2-year thesis, I realized that another 4 to 6 years of reading, writing, and researching maybe wasn't my jam. And so I had to make a pretty significant pivot. I've been a hockey coach, so I still use my degree a little bit. But after I finished at Miami, I really focused on business development and engagement. So my career took me to Chicago, Seattle, Pittsburgh, and Louisville before I ended up in Indiana in 2000. So been here since 2000, been pretty heavily involved in the tech startup space. I actually ran 2 of my own small companies out of Launch Fishers. And then I was CEO for a company called Fast Tech, which is an IoT services company. It was right post-COVID, and unfortunately, we didn't get the funding that we were hoping we were going to get. And so that was a little bit more of a short-lived stint than I would have liked. But I learned a tremendous amount in that role, and working with investors and getting a really good feel for what VC and funding rounds look like in the state of Indiana. And then, so after that, I worked for a handful of other startups. I was at 1150 Academy for a couple of years with Scott Jones, was also at Engineered Innovation Group with Jake Miller, and really just kind of always had my eye on TechPoint. Like I said, been super familiar with the tech ecosystem and particularly startups. And TechPoint has just always been on my radar since I kind of moved to Indiana. And when the opportunity presented itself to join the team 2 years ago, I really jumped at it. So kind of I'll give the 50,000 foot overview of CICP and then into TechPoint and some of the things that we're doing, and the trajectory that we're currently on right now, I think is pretty exciting. So at the top of the pyramid, I guess, is CICP, so CEOs of Indiana Corporate Partners, and it's made up of 5 different nonprofit initiatives. So there's TechPoint, which we're obviously focused on tech enablement, tech convening, and tech growth in the state. There's Connexus, which is focused on manufacturing and logistics. BioCrossroads, which is focused on bio and pharma. AgriNovus, which is ag and ag tech. And then Ascend Indiana is focused on talent attraction and retention across all skill sets for the entire state. So all 5 of those initiatives were all in the same building, over by 16 Tech. We work pretty collaboratively. I think we've really stepped up the collaborative efforts these last couple of years in terms of how we can kind of present all of those different initiatives, service offerings in larger, I guess, bundled ways for some of our larger enterprise partners. And we then every 3 years also go forward for a funding grant through the Lilly Endowment. So we're in year 2.5 of a 3-year, approximately $50 to $60 million funding grant from the Lilly Endowment. And so just that's kind of the 50,000 foot level. And then I can drill into TechPoint a little bit more, but I'll pause there and see if you have any questions about that first blurb I just threw at you.
I have a question for you
Yeah.
first. Where did you coach hockey? Carmel, Fishers?
All the above. So I coached at Carmel. That's where I started, and then I also coached some travel hockey for a few years, and then coached at Westfield. Also coached at Zionsville, and then also spent a couple years as an assistant coach for Butler's club men's team. So yeah, coached off and on for like 10 plus years or so. I have a daughter now that's going to be a sophomore at IU Bloomington, and she was a competitive soccer player. And once she started traveling a lot more in like seventh, eighth grade, I kind of peeled back from coaching just because I really enjoyed watching her play. But who knows? I may get back into it. These old bones are kind of hard to get up and down on the ice now, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, there is just something about coaching high school and even college that I really enjoy. So yeah,
That's
hard to
cool.
believe. Yeah, hard to believe looking at me that I used to be a hockey player, but yeah, a
No,
long time ago.
I grew up in Noblesville and played on I was on Morris and when it froze all the time,
Okay,
and
yeah, yeah.
we used to play. But Carmel was the only place that had a team back then. So my friends that were like serious players, they played for Carmel. But Brenner Christensen, I don't know if that's a name that you ever coached. Was a good
I
friend of
don't
my
think I
son.
coached, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's amazing how much hockey has grown at the high school level
Yeah,
across.
I mean, you get into the region and Fort Wayne. I mean, obviously, Indianapolis, like the suburbs of Hamilton County and Carmel area, lots of hockey there as well. So yeah, it's pretty cool. I think with, not to go down this rabbit hole, but I could definitely talk about this. I think with the Fuel, moving their rink to Fishers, that's also had a, real positive impact on the growth of hockey, in the area as well. And that facility, if you haven't been to the Fishers Event Center, it is a top rate hockey facility, but they did a really good job. I mean, they host so many different events there. So the owners of the Fuel, I think, did a tremendous job in not only building one of the nicest minor league hockey rinks that I've been to, but also, I mean, they have tons of concerts there, and it's a really well done facility. So if you haven't had a chance, I'll put my plug in for the Fishers Event Center to get there and either check out a concert or a game.
I will, and it's actually kind of a good metaphor for the way that AI has spread across Indiana because like I said, when I was a kid, I graduated high school in '91. Carmel
Mm-hmm.
was the only like North Central Indiana area that had a hockey team, and now it's robust. 2 years ago, when I was working in Lafayette and bringing up AI, everyone was like, yeah, it's not really a very big deal, and it's not much on our radar. And now it's exploding, and so TechPoint has had a lot to do with that, and that might be a good segue just to
Yeah.
dive into exactly what TechPoint's up to.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Jason. So, yeah, it kind of explained the CICP component, and then TechPoint itself, really drilling down into TechPoint, is focused primarily on three main pillars. The first is our innovation programs, the second is our talent programs, and then third is our community programs. On the innovation side, which is where I met you, we have a number of different networks. So I'll run through them. There's four. There's our CIO network, Chief Information Officer network. It's over 400 members. Predominantly, probably 75% of the makeup of that is mid-sized to enterprise level, with the other 25% of the members being startup or higher education partners. We have 6 dinners a year, 6 coffee meetings a year, a really collaborative group. So one of the reasons I mentioned all the different cities I worked in before I came to Indiana is I haven't seen a group as collaborative as the CIO network anywhere in where I've worked. It is not uncommon to see quote unquote competing CIOs over dinner sharing best practices. I think one of the biggest differentiators for the state of Indiana, and the thing that gets me the most fired up, is kind of the mentality of a rising tide lifts all ships. And you just don't see that in some of the other markets. It's fair to say that, we probably can't compete on a pure talent and financial side right now with like Silicon Valley or the East Coast. I think Chicago is a great market. I tend to feel like it's a little bit more cutthroat. Whereas I think Indiana's real differentiator is its willingness to kind of lift everybody else. And that collaboration, I think, goes a long way. One part of my job as director of engagement is to kind of be that point person for the CIO network, but also make sure that we're telling stories, right? And sometimes there's that Hoosier hospitality mentality, where, I think there's opportunities for us to even tell more of our story. And so that's part of what I'm doing. And that's also a big part of what our new CEO, Eric Christopher, is doing. I wanted to mention Eric just because I think it's an important component of the direction that TechPoint is heading in. And I will get back to the other networks, but let me tell a little bit about Eric. So from Indiana, former co-founder and CEO for Xylo, SaaS platform, is really been in tune with the Indiana tech ecosystem. So very familiar with high alpha and funding mechanisms in the state. And then also a little plug for TechPoint. Xylo's won Mira Awards in the past, which I'll explain what that is for those that don't know. So he's been in the CEO seat for about 3 months now. And I'll talk a little bit more about what some of his strategic initiatives are, but very exciting, particularly as it relates to AI. So that's the CIO network with a little bit of a tangent. We have the CDO network, which you mentioned, which is our Chief Data Officer network. Also really collaborative group. It's a little bit smaller. Well, actually a lot smaller. It's probably only about 60 people right now, but we're growing it. With intent, we've kind of kept the CIO and CDO networks separate. They had some of their own traction before they kind of came under the umbrella of TechPoint. I always tell folks that CIOs tend to be focused on the overall tech health of an entire organization from, top to bottom, whereas CDOs are incredibly getting more and more valuable, but tend to be a lot more focused on cybersecurity, data integrity, AI, those types of things. And so they're a little bit more laser focused. And so with that, the programming that we offer for the CDO networks is a little bit different than the CIO network programming. It's a little bit more, particularly focused on some of those chief data officer focus areas.
Can I interrupt with a little
Yeah,
quick
please,
story?
man,
Because the
please.
CDO
Yeah.
network is fairly new. It's the newest
Yeah.
of them. And this is a Hoosier hospitality story. So at the time that I joined that network, I was working at a community paramedicine company that was 30 people strong. The CEO, I'd been the no-code chief AI officer in the sense of trying to deploy AI for our admin, some chat, custom GPTs and whatnot to homogenize things. And he came to me and was like, what would it look like to become a fully AI integrated company? And I started to dig in. And what I realized really quickly was like, you would have to move to a neo cloud environment. And I'm not going to get into the depth of it because it's over the head of a lot of people who listen to this, but when the CDO network people were there at the Indiana AI Innovation Network, I went up and asked them this question. I was like, listen, is what I'm thinking right or not right as to how you would have to do this? And they were like, well, why don't you just join the network and then we can talk about it? And
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know that I'm really qualified. And they're like, no, we would love for you to come because you're the end user voice that we need to hear from. And so it was such an honor to join, but it just felt good to be asked something like that to a guy like me who does not have data literacy skills that would qualify as a chief data officer.
But I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? And I think more and more people are, they're gaining a lot of knowledge on their own, right? And we do try and save the integrity of our innovation networks for sure. And I'll put this out there so that my boss is happy I said this. They are no sales zones, so we do really try and make them about collaboration and less about business development.
Which is awesome.
Yeah. So I'm the only biz dev guy that you'll see at the CIO network, but I'm not there in a sales capacity. But and we do that with intent because we want there to be the ability for folks to collaborate, speak freely without feeling like they're being sold to the whole time. So
but you're leading from the top down because people don't do that to each other there a lot either.
Correct.
And that's
correct.
when I said that's awesome, that's what I meant is I don't feel like I'm going to any of those and having a bunch of people trying to solicit me to
Yep.
leverage their services.
Yeah, I mean, we have sponsors and things like that, and so
Sure.
obviously we recognize our sponsors and appreciate them, and give them opportunities to meet with folks. But everybody gets it that it's not, hey, let me show up with 100 business cards and see how many contacts I can get. That's just not how this market works. At least been in my experience. I mean, I've seen business development relationships grow just based out of organic initial conversations. And, I always say this to folks, you have to give to get in this market. And what I mean by that is you don't have to pay to play, but you have to like be involved and want to help shape the tech ecosystem. If you're showing up and you're involved and you're having conversations and you're collaborating, I mean, business is just going to kind of evolve naturally out of that. So, yeah, so that good sidetrack there. Glad that you're participating in the CDO network as well. Another one which I know you're a big fan of is our AI Innovation Network. That one's now going on about 2 years old. It's our largest. The cool thing about the AI Innovation Network, I think it's like over 800 members now. Those events are always in person and virtual. It's our only group of four of the four where we have that virtual component right now. And because of that, it's really given us pretty significant expansion across the state. So we have like pockets of people that attend virtually, in Columbus and Fort Wayne and Elkhart, Lafayette, like different pockets of the state. And then we've also been able to kind of partner with some organizations that are outside of central Indiana. And they do some like hosting parties where, they're kind of they have the big TV screen up, but they're like having people come to their location to participate. So, the AI Innovation Network, it's a lot because there's just so varied in terms of like people's level of experience with AI, right? So the cool thing about the AI Innovation Network is it's entry-level practitioners, folks that have barely used AI, to you've attended some of our like case studies where we have, the Cummins of the world and others presenting, case studies on what their AI plan looks like within their organization or certain projects. And so it's awesome. I think we're going to continue to try and evolve what programming looks like so that, that we can, kind of meet people where they need to be met. And it's, I'm really excited about what that's going to look like. There's also some really good companies in the area that are also doing like different AI programming. And so I think there's an opportunity for TechPoint to collaborate or lean in with some of those organizations as well. And make sure that we're all like pulling in the same direction, right? As I mentioned, Eric Christopher, our CEO, I think he hit the nail on the head internally once. He said that he really wants TechPoint to kind of be like the air traffic controller of all these different organizations in the state. And I don't think that TechPoint necessarily has to be the doer of everything, right? There may be some opportunities for us to lean in with other organizations that are maybe already doing some things better than we are, and work more closely with them. So excited about that. I'll pause, Jason. Any thoughts on the AI Innovation Network before I go into the last bit?
Well, I'm super stoked because Citizen AI's CEO Mo Caden is coming in from the Bay Area this week, and he and I are going to a community mental health center event in Fort Wayne. But then I'm going to AI Fort Wayne in
Yeah,
person Friday,
nice.
so that's going to be really cool.
Yeah, there's just a lot of good stuff happening. And then lastly, let me talk about the last innovation group,
Sure, go for it.
which is sorry, Founders Network. It took me a
Yep.
second. I was going through my mental checklist. Founders Network, which TechPoint has always been a massive supporter of founders, but having Eric been a founder, I think that's one of his primary focus areas is how do we lean in and better support founders in the state, and how do we, get innovative in finding ways to get them resources? How can we maybe get founders AI credits? How do we help them maximize time and money, candidly, by providing them things much more affordably, and so excited to hear kind of what Eric's plan is on that, where it will finalizing kind of what our strategic plan is going to look like for the rest of this year and 27 here in the next couple of weeks. But I'm really excited about that. Having been a small time but former founder myself, I think there's a real opportunity for this state and TechPoint to kind of take the lead on how do we best support founders and how do we maybe do it better than where anybody else in the country is. So those are the innovation programs. And as I mentioned, there's like an application process, but the AI Innovation Network it's a pure open network. So anybody can join that, even if they've never touched AI or if they're using it exclusively as like a product offering or, service offering as part of their business. So I'll just kind of put that plug out there. I think it's definitely, for anybody listening that's interested in learning more about AI, it's definitely a great way to get involved. And Jason, you've obviously enjoyed that network as well, because I see you at every single one, and you're always having great conversations. So
I appreciate that. And you gave your shout out to Eric, and welcome to Eric. I think he's a great addition, but I have to give my shout out to Chelsea Linder,
yeah,
Michaela Early, and Mary Doherty, who are
hmm
always there as like hospitality, welcoming, giving out the name badges and swag and just organizing things. I mean, again, that who's your hospitality? Like, you guys have an amazing team of very welcoming people that are just so enjoyable to work with. And I got a chance to go to your main event this year for the first time at the Carmel Palladium, the
yeah,
Mira Awards, which
yeah.
maybe you can touch a little bit on, because that was, wow, that was quite the spectacle.
Yeah, so that's our largest community event. So it's the Mira Awards. We also then each year do 2 to 3 Community Connect events, which is an opportunity for everybody from every network or even non-network folks to attend events. But Mira is definitely the crown jewel. I think this was our 26th year doing it. Uh, we'll have some announcements about where it's going to be next year. Some pretty exciting ideas in the hopper with that. But for those listeners that aren't familiar with Mira, it is the largest tech recognition event in the state. It's one of the largest in the country, and think of it as like the Oscars, but for tech awards. So we usually hand out like 15 to 20 awards a year, everything from Startup of the Year to Trailblazer of the Year, Deal of the Year, Innovation of the Year. And it's about a 2-hour program, I think, hour and a half, 2-hour program, black tie, gala, just a great event. And the last 2 years it's been at the Palladium in Carmel. I can't say where it's going to be next year, but I think we're going to be looking at some different options. So kind of excited about what the shape and scope of that'll look like. And then for anybody that's listening that has their own company, or works for a company that is in Indiana, the Mira Award application process will probably open up in Q3 here. I would just encourage anybody and everybody to look at applying for an award or reach out to me and I can kind of point you in the right direction. The application process is much simpler than it was a number of years ago. It's essentially now a one-pager, where in the past it was almost like an RFP. And so by the time people got to the presenting to judges, there wasn't any conversation or questions left because everything was, covered in the long application process. So it's just a great opportunity to get your name and your company in front of key decision makers in the state. And I like letting everybody know this. TechPoint has no say in who wins those awards. We host everything. We convene the panel of judges, but the judges are made up of local tech leaders, previous winners, previous nominees, and then they judge and they deliberate on who wins each award. And I've been part of the judging process as a moderator for the last 2 years. And there's been a couple times where I didn't get to leave until 7 or 8 o'clock at night because some of the deliberations went, long. So it's taken very seriously. It is definitely one of the cooler things I've seen. P30 won an award this year that was just really, really awesome. Their excitement level was exactly why we do the award. So it was great.
Yeah, it was. It was awesome. But I have to put in a shameless plug for you to stay at the Palladium, because otherwise I don't know how we're gonna pay for all the ugly statues that Bringer put in our roundabouts. But
Hey, I live in Fishers, so I know plenty about roundabouts. Believe me, we don't have this same level of statues as Carmel does, but I like roundabouts, but that's probably an entirely different podcast.
I like the roundabouts, but some of those statues,
They
and if you
scare
see the
me.
price tags on them, are
Oh yeah.
hideously ugly, and they were millions of dollars. So
If
I
you
don't
don't
know.
know they're there, they kind of freak me out every once in a while. Like like,
I mean, they're good at deterring drinking and driving, because you
yeah,
wouldn't
that's for
enter
sure.
one of those roundabouts
Yeah,
if you.
yeah. The couple of, I think there's one that's like a police officer or something. So anyway, so that's Mira Awards is definitely a big thing. It's usually in April of every year. So definitely encourage your listeners to check that out next year. Should be a really good time. And then real quick, just on the talent side, I want to mention the talent stuff that we're doing because I think it's very applicable to AI and what we're seeing. So we have two primary talent programs. The first is our Xtern program. And that program is now 13 plus years. It's our summer internship program. We work with anywhere from 30 to 40 companies every summer. It's actually in session right now. And then we help recruit or place about 100 students this summer. And then we provide housing for those students. We can do the full recruiting for companies. If they don't have the resources to go out and find interns on their own, we can do that for them. Or in some instances, particularly with some of our larger partners, they may already have, a large group of interns and they want to rely on us for the housing and then also the 3 weekends of programming that we do over the 10-week summer. So we kind of weave both professional and civic engagement as well as like social components into our 3 weekends of programming. And what I think is really important about Xtern is over 13 years, we've obviously surveyed all of our participants. And before these students participate in the program, we asked them the likelihood that they would stay or relocate to Indiana for a tech-based job. And before the program, only about 29% say that they would. And then after completing the program, that number jumps up to 53%. So now we have roughly 1,300 alums that have been through Xtern that when they first started were, junior level tech folks and are now running departments and hiring. And now we have a much larger voice of people that realize there is quite a significant tech ecosystem in Indiana. So that's an awesome program, and would encourage any of your listeners that want to learn more to contact you or me, and I'd be more than happy to talk to them about it. The success of Xtern spun off into another program called Xtern Challenge. Xtern Challenge, we can only do 2, maybe 3 times a year because we have to do it when students are in session. But think of it as like an internship sprint. And so most recently we did one with Cummins, and then previous to that we did one with MISO. MISO is going to participate again this year. We're also partnering with Ivy Tech later this year on a statewide IT challenge. But the premise of Xtern Challenge is we recruit about 100 students. We break them up into teams of 5. And most of these students are from Indiana. And then we work with a particular partner, and that partner develops a very specific business use case that they want solved. We then have these teams spend 2 weeks while they're already taking their classes at all the amazing colleges and universities across the state. They work asynchronously on that problem for 2 weeks. And then when that's over, they all come in and then they present to a panel of judges from that company. So the customization of that for some of these businesses is amazing. Like all of our partners have absolutely loved the feedback and the intel that they got from these students, and just to be able to see like the utilization of AI and like how innovative these students can be in a short period of time. And most of these business use cases, shockingly, are around AI. So to kind of see students that are in it and maybe probably don't have some of the same blinders on that folks that, were working at the same place day in and day out. Getting that fresh perspective, I think, has been really, really impactful for some of the businesses that we've worked with. And honestly, the students, they compete for cash prizes and in some instances, even internship spots at those businesses. So it's pretty cool. And like, I've been blown away by what these projects and what they're able to get done in pretty short order. It's massively impressive.
That is impressive. And it's awesome that you're able to raise that 23% to 50%, because as a native Hoosier who left for a decade in my early 20s until my 30s, and my daughter, who's 27, is out in San Diego working in pharmacy now, I
Mm-hmm.
understand the Midwest is not the most attractive place in the world until you have kids. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, yeah, I'd much rather raise my kids in Crawfordsville than Los Angeles. But
Yeah.
to be able to attract those young people and make them want to start here is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And
I
you've
think, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, finish that thought, and then I'm gonna give you some rapid fire questions if you're
Okay.
game.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Indiana cost of living, you can't beat it, right? That Midwest mentality, I think, is amazing. I continue to think that, part of my job and the job at TechPoint is to make sure that we're shining the biggest spotlight on our tech ecosystem as possible. And so that is definitely something that keeps me getting up in the morning and keeps me fired up, because I think the best is yet to come, in all honesty. I think some of the ideas that Eric has and how we can even grow attraction from bigger players, like, the Googles, the Anthropics, the massive players, to see the continued value in this market. And candidly, Eric has the chops to be able to pull those kind of people in. So yeah, I think this market and what innovation is going to look like in the next 5 years is pretty exciting. So yeah, I'm excited to be here and be a part of it.
Yeah, and listen, there's you guys are just doing incredible work. Now, I I I am not someone who likes to bring people on my podcast and argue with them. But I'm a debater by
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
Myers-Briggs, right? So
yeah.
you have some questions. The only person I've ever put in the hot seat on this podcast is Mayor Figum from Carmel, because I
Okay,
disagree with the fact that my daughter is not using AI in school yet. In high school.
yeah,
You don't have to get into that, but I still disagree with that. And if anybody's listening, they need to fix that. Um, but I do have some questions
please.
around, because some comments of what I see as strengths, and some questions around what are still question marks in my head that I'd like to fire off at Chris, not TechPoint, but Chris
Yeah.
Hutchinson, who's been really deeply into this. So for a while now, I have seen the idea of the hard tech corridor that Purdue wants to build between Lafayette or West Lafayette and Indianapolis, right? And at times I've heard it um, framed as the Silicon Prairie, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
see it as anything like Silicon Valley. To me, the hard tech corridor is all big businesses, agritech, defense. What like Silicon Valley was Jobs and Wozniak in their garage, and it's still like those
Mm-hmm.
little tiny companies. Uh, am I wrong to think that Indiana is slightly more friendly to big business startups than it is to little tiny startups?
Um,
In
I
regulation, in funding. I'm not saying Tech Point. I'm just saying the
yeah,
Indiana business ecosystem as a whole.
I think and I need to be delicate here. I think that it is open to both. I think that um I think this is a great place for startups. I think there's some opportunities for us to improve access to VC, which is a big goal of Eric and TechPoints. Candidly, I think we would love to see an IPO in Indiana. Sooner than later. Um, and I think that there's opportunities to do that. I attracting outside businesses had been a pretty strong asset, I think, of what Indiana had done in the past. kind of tend to think that there's a little bit more of a focus on Main Street now, and so I think that might be beneficial for startups and companies that are maybe looking to hang out their own shingle. But me personally, I think it needs to be a healthy mix of both. I think when you are welcoming and attracting outside businesses to relocate or open an additional headquarters in Indiana, comes with that is suppliers and other businesses that like come and kind of follow those larger businesses. And I think those bigger companies with the resources that they have drives innovation as well. So I'm kind of dancing around a little bit, Jason. I think there's strong opportunities for both. I think recently there's been more of a focus on like Main Street and local, which is okay, and fully support that and want startups and local businesses to thrive. But I think it needs to be a healthy mix of both in order to really be innovative and, kind of expand our thumbprint, so to speak.
I think that's a very pragmatic and fair and honest answer, and I appreciate that. Now I'll throw a positive at you, because early on in the conversation, you mentioned going to Bowling Green,
Yeah.
right? So Bowling Green State University and Ohio State leaned into AI education and fusion across campuses like 18 months ago, quite a while ago, before Indiana did it. And I used to be on my Schools Out podcast, be like, why can't we be more like Ohio? And this last year, we really did lean into it. My theory is that we have the perfect educational trifecta to be a leading state. We've got Indiana University, which has medicine, the humanities, the environment, and law. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We've
Mm-hmm.
got Purdue University, which is more or less the MIT of the Midwest. So you've got the
Yep.
tech stack there. And then we've got Notre Dame with the ethical side of things, which is a huge conversation. So we've kind of got that triad of university, not to mention Notre Dame, or not to mention Butler and Rose-Hulman and a whole bunch of other supporting agencies. But I think we have the perfect higher education ecosystem to really move forward with AI.
Yeah, and let's not forget about Ivy Tech too.
Yeah.
So I mean, they have campuses. I can't remember, but I think they have one in darn near every county or close to it. And it's the largest. It's the largest institution of its kind in the country, the largest system of its kind in the country. And I think also from an education perspective, and this is my opinion, so bear with me, but I think that yes, there's always going to be a need for 4-year degrees. There's always going to be a need for that technical component. But I worked for 1150 Academy. I really bought into the boot camp mentality. I think there's still real viability behind that model. Training opportunities without necessarily needing to go and get a full 4-year degree. I think Ivy Tech does a tremendous job of getting people opportunities to get trained in a variety of skill areas. But I think even with their focus on IT and tech, I think that's huge for this state, and it's huge for the workforce as well. You mentioned some of the big players and big colleges and universities. Their focus on being able to research and innovate. And I think that the schools that you mentioned are doing an amazing job, particularly Purdue, Indiana, and Notre Dame. But Rose-Hulman has some really good programs in terms of outreach as well, as does DePaul. So, and I'm not playing favorites. Those are some ones that like pop into my head. I think Indiana is really primed if we continue to lean in the what Indiana did with like their AI adoption model. Yeah, definitely borrowed from Ohio, but I mean, that's getting a lot of traction. I'm talking to business owners or C-level executives that are trying to figure out where do they even begin with AI. Well, what IU is doing with this like free access to this training is a massive first start, right? So some folks that, particularly in banking, where they're trying to maybe figure out, well, how do we incorporate, AI? Where do we even begin? This is what I always tell everybody. You can't just like throw AI at it to fix it and be like, we need AI. Well, what's the business use case? Well, I don't know, but I know we need AI. Well, if you don't have good data integrity, if you don't have like a policy of like how you're going to incorporate it, it's the garbage in, garbage out, right? So it's not going to be a useful utilization of the technology if you don't have people that are at least somewhat familiar with it. So I think we're going to continue to see people get more comfortable with it. I think we're going to continue to see higher education leaning in and like working with businesses, but also figuring out how do we innovate? How do we research? How do we be that like partner? And I agree with you. So my daughter's a sophomore in college, as I mentioned. She doesn't love AI. So I won't go into a lot of it, but she doesn't love it.
Yeah, with the whole Eric Schmidt booing and all that. Yeah, feel
Yeah,
free, but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there's a
So
horrible sentiment across the
her and
nation.
I have like we have good conversations about it. I appreciate where she's coming from. She has concerns about what it means to the environment, et cetera. I do too. And honestly, I think one of the biggest innovations we'll see, this is me just pie in the skying, but whoever can come up with a better cooling system in the next 5 years, that person is going to be the next trillionaire. Because if we can figure out how to be more efficient in water usage, et cetera, in
But we
cooling.
have. I mean, there's ones that a whole data center the size of Meta's would use the same amount of water as a restaurant in Lebanon, but
Yeah,
it's just more expensive. And so
yeah, exactly.
that's the I do want to get into the data centers, but let's finish the education real quick.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Let me just piggyback on what you're saying because I 200% agree. Like first off, I don't think that higher education is in trouble because they will always bend because they need the dollars, right? So
Yeah.
those higher universities are probably going to become research and philosophy and ethics universities, but the DeVrys and the Ivy Techs and all those are coming back, and Ivy
Mm-hmm.
Tech has leaned into it wonderfully. I was
Yeah.
on a committee there where they brought in a bunch of industry experts to say, what should we be teaching? I love what we're doing in higher ed. I'm concerned with what we're doing in K through
Like high
12
school.
and how
Yeah.
pocketed it is, and how I, K through 12 they are government funded. They can lean into being risk adverse for a long, long time. And I'm fear that I love the Alpha School model out of Austin, Texas. I
Mm-hmm.
realize that that's not replicable identically at a public school level, but I do think that we need to kind of figure out how we're going to move K through 12 forward.
I agree. I mean, we're on the same page with that. I think not using AI and not incorporating it is not a good play in K through 12. I think it's one of those things where you need to lean in and understand it because it's not going anywhere, right? So why not begin looking at how to use it ethically and how to use it as an asset, learn about data centers and everything else, learn everything behind it. It's going to be a skill that's needed. We use Claude at TechPoint, and I wouldn't say I use it like every second of every day. There are still needs for someone like me who can have conversations with folks and be able to like uh shake hands and kiss babies, for lack of a
Sure.
better term. But I use it quite a bit in terms of I'll use ChatGPT maybe for a little bit more like brainstorming, but I use it for like research and figuring out, okay, what do I need to know about this particular company, or what have they done recently, and the feedback that you can get, it saves you so much time. And then I'm still working on different integrations and how to build things so that I don't have to write 100 emails a day. But I still like that. That's the other thing, is like I like making sure that there's a personal touch on every piece of communication I put out there, and I don't want them to ever like seem auto generated or canned. So if you get an email from me, I actually wrote it. It wasn't built by ChatGPT or Claude, so know that.
I
But
cannot see the same, but that's all right. But but I agree with you, and it's not just on the talent side, right? Like, we
Yeah,
missed the bus with social media. I just listened to a big national survey. 27%, only 27% of parents have ever talked to their kids about how to use AI, aside from don't use it to cheat on homework, right? And I was
right.
like, hey, you're in that 27% to my 15-year-old, and she rolled her eyes. But the
Yeah,
fact of the matter is, Hasbro and Mattel are trying to put LLMs into their toys. You're going to have a generation of little kids growing up with their toys talking to them the same way their siblings and friends do. And if
yeah.
we don't help them understand that that is not a sentient being, we're going to end up with some messed up kids that's worse than what social media did. And schools have got to be a big part of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, my daughter's of a generation that she grew up essentially with a cell phone in her hand, right?
Mhm.
And there's positives and negatives to it. Um, I I think there's something pretty compelling about having all access to the world's information in your hand from a very early age, and it helps you create discussions, and you better check your facts, right? So there's real time ability to check what you say and see if it's true or not. But I agree. I think we we need to build in responsible
Age appropriate.
utilization, yeah, age appropriate, and make sure that we're not just like making it the Wild West, like I still think we're kind of recovering from social media impact on kids. My daughter's not really a kid anymore, she's 19, but still always a kid to me. But I mean, social media had a massive impact on her life. We couldn't go to a soccer game without making 16 videos before or after the game. That, and I'm going in a rabbit hole. I have 2 degrees in psychology, so bear with me. But like
No,
that,
man.
that tying to, tying your self-worth to number of likes and comments and stuff, man, that is tough because it's, I didn't have that. And, I still get like, upset if somebody says something bad about me or, has a disagreement with me. And that's just like one-on-one, let alone, when you amplify it over social media. So, but also on the flip side, I think social media is great for like content creation and creativity, and people develop their own like circle of friends. And so there's 2 sides to every coin for sure. But I do think that we need to figure out how the heck do we prepare young kids, and have an understanding of, you know, AI and the impact that it can have on them. Because, companies aren't going to stop utilizing it, and they're not going to suddenly say, well, we don't want to make money anymore either. So it's going to be there. So you need to, I think, figure out how do you meet students where they need to be met.
Well, and we're getting a little long, and I don't want
Yeah,
to
I
keep
know.
you all
Sorry about
day.
that.
No, 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 I'm fine, but I don't want to keep you all day. But I do. You just brought up the thing that is my concern with our youth, and why, when I look at Asia, I'm afraid they will surpass us, which is they lean into technology as creators, and we lean into it as consumers. And that's the shift that has to be made. Don't sit and watch TikTok all day. Like, generate a product and get it out there. Spin up an app. Like, use the technology to do something productive, other than just, see whether or not what your friends are doing, and and
Love that. I
without.
agree. I agree 100%. And the resources are there, right? Like
Yes.
I am not an engineer, and but have I dabbled trying to like build some stuff in Claude? Absolutely, because it's like it's the only way you kind of learn it, right? And I was all excited because we have our contracts are really hard because we're a nonprofit. So I built in like a drop down menu one, and it didn't take me too long. It was like a good solid like afternoon of working on it on a Saturday, and I got all excited and sent it to my boss. She's like, "Oh, I should have told you we're moving to a 1-page contract, but this is awesome." I was like, "Ah, darn it!" But
But to be
there,
fair, before November last year, you and I couldn't do that very well, right? And now we really can. We can
yeah,
spin up HTML pages. We can do it. Like, we can build quite a bit of stuff. Maybe not scalable, but
right,
for just internal use
internal,
or
yeah,
personal use,
yeah,
it's amazing.
it really is. It's pretty
And
cool.
now there are kids who are making movies. Like you saw those two YouTubers that had top movies. That's going to
Yeah.
move down into content generation. I have no problem with kids using it. I just don't want them to use it to create Italian brain rot. I want them to be on there like building things and becoming engineers. China is graduating millions of engineers a year from their universities to our hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
That will be problematic in the long run.
Yeah, and I think there's opportunity, right? So there's certainly opportunity to improve that. But I also think that we've seen trends like this before too, right? So some of this is, in my opinion, cyclical, but I definitely, we're not moving away from AI. It's definitely here. I think what you are seeing with some recent trends of businesses hiring people back and now realizing, well, gosh, maybe we can't just trim our workforce and utilize AI for everything. You still need that like human component to it, because AI, at least from what I could tell, still can't pick up on like sarcasm very well. I mean, so you still need kind of eyes on things, and if you're not double checking your work or asking for references when you're plugging in questions or solutions, then you're doing it wrong, and that's like some of the part of the training too, right? Is like you can't just trust it with a blind eye. You still need to like check your work, and you need to like ask for reference and those kind of things. So, yeah, I think it's an exciting time, but I think innovation breeds innovation. So, um,
It's kind of that Jevons paradox, right? The more
yeah,
we build, the more opportunities open up, and the more opportunities there are, and the more we need people.
absolutely.
So let's get back together sometime to talk about data centers, because that could be
Okay.
like an
Yeah,
entire
yeah,
episode, right? And
yeah,
I know
yeah.
we both probably have some passionate opinions on it. That I would love to schedule time to get back on about that. The last thing I want to ask you, which is, a lot of different people have different timelines, and
Hmm.
I've always thought Elon's always his ideas will come to fruition, just not anywhere near the timelines he has. Dario's timeline sometimes I think have been kind of inflated to try to sell his product and come out as like the safety guy in the
Hmm.
danger zone, and they were obviously wrong about the 50% of workforce being, but the one thing I do see that concerns me, or I'm excited. I'm a techno optimist, right? I do think there's a
Hmm.
point in time where we probably won't have a whole lot of control over something that's a lot smarter than us. But recursive self improvement seems to be where all that changes, and we go from like super fast to like exponentially fast. And sometimes I wonder if we're not getting close to that. So I guess my question to you would be, my wife, who works for a community mental health center, still doesn't feel the effects of AI at all.
Hmm.
In 2027, how much more effects do you think the average individual is going to feel on the impact of AI on our economy?
Whew, man, that's not exactly a softball question, Jason.
I'm sorry.
I asked you before if there's anything I needed to prep for. That would have been a good one. No, I think the impact on the economy. Gosh, I tend to think that the knee jerk reaction of letting large groups of people go and becoming more reliant on AI, I think that is going to continue to like kind of back up a bit. I tend to be a techno optimist for the most part. I mean, me personally, I want to. I like working with companies that are ethical, right? So, and ethics and capitalism don't always go hand in hand necessarily,
Sure.
but I do tend to think that positive things are going to come out of AI. I do think that what jobs may have been eliminated, they may not be brought back in the exact way that they were previously. I think there's going to maybe be some adaptations. I think there's going to be opportunities to train up folks. I am a big believer that I think AI is going to continue to reduce a lot of like mundane work, and even in some instances, like on the manufacturing side, like dangerous work or work that tends to be a little bit more dangerous. Um, so I'm optimistic that the impact on the market from a jobs perspective, there may be some, and again, this is just my opinion. So
Sure.
there may be some shifts in what skills are needed and training. There may be some need to train folks up in certain areas, but I can't envision this level of innovation just suddenly being like completely self-sustaining without input from human beings. And again, not an engineer, but just kind of my experience and seeing, I still think that the what really will move the needle is people. My hope is that big business will realize the value of the human worker. And even though there may be opportunities to refine or even move people into different areas, different skills, that they'll train those folks, or those opportunities will present themselves, and then individuals will still continue to kind of come back to the workforce. That's my gut. I can't see like a dystopian situation where we're just completely run by AI and humans just become drones or whatever. So that's my positive hope. And I don't know if that I
Well,
don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of my 50,000-foot view on it.
it does. And it doesn't disalign with what I think that it's really empowering a lot of I think ambitious people going forward are going to be fine. I think
Yeah,
that people
yeah,
who completely lack ambition do have some danger, and people who refuse to learn new things, like we're all going to have to be lifetime learners. I think the timeline for that is constrained by compute and energy and all of that. And so
yeah,
that
yeah.
again is the data center conversation to get into. But I really appreciate you giving your time
Of
and meeting with
course.
me today and talking about all the amazing work you guys are doing. I'd be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to the the Central Indiana Education and Keep Indiana Learning for the work that they're doing with K through 12. So I don't want anyone to think that I don't think that we're trying to do that work in Indiana. I just think we need to make sure we continue to do it. And I hope that TechPoint and all of you all just continue to lead us in a direction that is positive and that attracts more talent and keeps the Hoosier heartland what it is, which is a great place to live and raise kids.
Agreed, Jason. Yeah, I always say Indiana's a great place to live, work, and play. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you having me on, and yeah, let's find time a little bit later. We can maybe delve into data centers on another episode.
That will be fun. We could talk about how almonds and golf courses use a hell of a lot more water than data centers. But
Absolutely.
all right,
All
man.
right,
Thank
Jason.
you.
Take care. Have a great day. Bye.